Hey everybody, welcome back to the Fish Tank. My name's BadAsFish80 and we've got some more exciting news about Minion Masters and the future. Now, if you've been following the Minion Masters news lately and some of my previous videos, you will see that we've had a lot of changes coming in recently. Currently, we've got faster mana, faster XP, flying units can no longer take bridges, spells overall have had a nerf, there's a new King Puff, and there's been a huge amount of balance changes. But that's not all. We've got more to come. Now today we're going to be talking about wildcards. Now wildcards have always been a very interesting topic that some people love, some people hate, and there's always a lot of discussion about it. Now wildcards are the ability to use more than one copy of a card in your deck. So at the moment there are 2 wildcards available, which means you can have up to 3 copies of a single card in your deck or 2 copies of 2 cards. Now, why may we not like this? Well, I don't like this because you generally find people use wildcards to use more than one copy of a card that is very strong. And then it makes it very difficult for your opponent to answer it. And the game becomes less about skill and more about just who can play the most overpowered cards as often as possible. Now, for example, Brutish Betrayer. We see people running 3 of those at a time with all the support spells. And that's just, in my opinion, a pretty disgusting deck. And unless you have a very specific setup and an incredibly a high level of skill to defend against it appropriately, then unfortunately you're probably going to lose. And the reason I hate things like this is because it allows a far less skillful player to beat a far more skillful player using nothing but just overpowered cards. But obviously everyone has their own opinion, so we have to, whilst we all have our own opinion, we need to appreciate and respect everyone else's opinion. Now, let's talk about wildcards. So as we mentioned, there are currently 2 wildcards that you can use. So let's get into this latest blog post from Beta Dwarf, the developers, and see where we're standing with them. Okay, so we go through here. They mentioned that wildcards have been one of the most widely criticised features of Minion Masters, and with the upcoming 2.0, they think now's a good time to potentially look at them and change them. Now, they felt that wildcards added to the main goal of people having fun and challenging themselves, but maybe not anymore. Here they say about the argument that it disturbs the overall balance of the game, and we agree. Now, there's lots of cards on their own that are not very strong, but with 3 of them, they're very strong. And with wildcards being part of the game, that has to be part of the thought process when the devs are balancing the cards, and that makes the balance far more difficult to achieve. They mention here about that the feature meaning wildcards, allowed for more creativity in deck building, and in most cases for more fun. But they've also said here that wildcards somewhat limits design space. So things like Thelic, as I mentioned before, Lord Sentinel Thelic, if somebody plays one of them, it can generally be easily handled with a spell. But if they play 2 of them or 3 of them, it's just a case that they've got more answers and you have less ways to repel them. Now, interestingly, Beta Dwarf, the developers, did run a survey asking about wildcards. So they've very transparently given us the results of the survey, which is something that I'm very happy with. And what they've said is 60% of players like wildcards, 36% of players vote to keep wildcards as they are, 31% ask for a change, and 32% want them flat out removed. They also mentioned generally we see the call for removal mostly with high rank players. Around 70% of the remove votes come from players in master rank or above. Now that's when people start to get quite serious about the game and they want to improve themselves and play the game at the highest level possible. And I've always believed that wildcards really reduces the skill cap of the game and just allows just a lot of nonsense, really. They also say whilst we see the positive impact of wildcards is more widely spread than the negative, it does seem to be less intense. And then if you will put the link to these posts in the description, but then they show exactly the results and what people have said. So what happens now? They've done the survey. So despite the majority of players telling us that wildcards are good for the game, we're going to go out on a limb. We believe that the time is right to try something else. We wish to do a test in which we will remove wildcards from the game for a full season. So that will be in the upcoming season, starting with patch 1.27, which we're at the start of a new patch at the moment, so that'll be in 25 days or something like that. After that season ends, we'll be asking everyone again to see what the feelings are, having tried the game without wildcards. So lots of people have an opinion about what the game's like with wildcards, what the game's like without wildcards, but the problem is very few people have had a chance to try the game without wildcards. I believe when the game originally launched many moons ago, and the game has been out for quite some time, like 2016 or something crazy, when it first launched, I believe wildcards weren't a thing there. So basically what they're going to do is they've done the survey, they're going to run a test, and then they're going to do another survey and see where things lie. Okay, so they mentioned why are they doing it now? Well, they mentioned already that 2.0 is on the horizon, and they want to get the game in the most balanced state possible for that. And then they also mention here when wildcards, when added to the game, there were only 77 cards. Compare that to 225, 227, whatever we're at now. So wildcards for them seem to make sense at the start with less cards, whereas now there's lots of alternatives, lots of cards, lots of deck building opportunities, even without wildcards. Okay, so they believe now's the right time to reevaluate the fundamental feature of the game. There's a broad enough variety of cards to choose all sorts of different strats. And then they mention here about how it's difficult to balance the game with wildcards in it. Okay, so they're telling us why they're doing it. They're also telling us what happens in the long term. Well, they don't know, because this is a test. They're going to see how the test goes, see how people respond to it, and then make some decisions after that. So, and then they say here, if we decide to remove wildcards permanently, we do have plans to look into the design space that is created in their absence. There are several ways we can make the cards that emulate the wildcard mechanic, and we hope to use this to reintroduce the good parts of it in a more controlled manner. Interesting to see what their options, what their ideas are there. But if they can keep the essence of wildcards in with maintaining the good parts of it but removing the negatives, then that'll be ideal. Okay, so in conclusion, we'll be removing wildcards in patch 1.27 and most likely remain removed in 1.28 as they go over the results. So we're going to have 1 or 2 seasons with no wildcards to see what the game is like, and then we can make a better decision, give some more appropriate feedback based on our experiences during that. But they are keen for you to try what the game is like with no wildcards during the test, and be sure to give your feedback. So there's links here, as I said, we'll put the link in the description. There's links here for their Discord, for their Facebook, for their Twitter. Make sure you feedback to them on any of the platforms, Reddit, Steam community forums, Discord, etc, etc. Let them know what you think. Well, so that's the blog post. What happens now? Well, now we wait until the test, and we'll see how the test goes. I'm excited to see what it's going to be like. As everybody who knows me knows, I'm a supporter of the removal of wildcards, but of course everybody has their own feelings. But it'll be interesting to see what the game is like without wildcards, and to see how people generally react to it. So I'm excited to see that. I think it's brave. I've said this before, and I got criticised for it, but I think it's brave of the developers to try this. You know, they've done the survey. They are going against the majority of the survey, but remember, it's only a test, and this is giving people an opportunity to see what it's like and then have additional feedback. So lots of stuff coming for Minion Masters, lots of changes already, more on the horizon, and I'm excited for the future. The devs seem to be doing a great job with a lot of people were freaking out with so many different changes. They did hotfix very quickly to remove some of the stuff that was far too strong. So I'm excited that the devs are being very proactive and reactive to the changes, and we'll look forward to seeing how this test goes. Anyway, Thanks so much for your time. Thanks for joining me here in the fish tank. My name's Bad as Fish 80. I hope you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up, give it a like, drop the subscribe. If you're enjoying the content, we'll have more coming soon. Take care of yourself and see you next time.